I am Jeffrey Epstein. That's how the letter starts. And what we're examining today appears to be a handwritten letter written just a few months before Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his prison cell that I do believe potentially was actually written by Jeffrey Epstein. There are some really bizarre details shared in here. This letter seems to have been typed out or written in 2009, and in this letter, which was recently discovered within the Epstein Files, it seems that Epstein was trying to almost exonerate himself. He knew that something was coming. He knew that these investigations were ramping up, and so as a attack before the main attack, or I guess how did I describe this? As a defense while he was building up to prepare for the attack, he wrote this letter. Now, this wasn't ever released publicly. I believe that this is Jeffrey Epstein writing this. And you'll see the letters TK throughout this letter, which I'm going to read you. And that in the journalism world represents the phrase to come. So, like if he said they were paid approximately TK, that means he was still trying to figure out what number to put there and just put TK in as a placeholder. Now, one thing I've never understood is why they say TK instead of TC, which is to come. Online, it states that the methodology behind that choice is they write TK because it looks more jarring than TC, but alas, I digress. Anyways, y'all, be sure to leave me a comment on today's video and let me know your thoughts on this letter. I'd never seen this before up until recently. I found this to be pretty compelling, and I'm just going to read this to you straight down. Let's take a look at this together. So he starts. I am Jeffrey Epstein. For 12 years, I've been the subject of greater and lesser media attention. In that time, I have never spoken publicly. This was in part because I did not recognize the person portrayed in the media. I know who I was, the media did not. I believed that I could at least reclaim my privacy, if not my good name, by being private. That obviously is not the case. So now, reluctantly, let me try to overcome the media's version of me and tell you a little about myself and my circumstance. I am a successful investor and have devoted a significant amount of the money I've made to scientific and medical research. Now that part's true, but what he's not being truthful about is that some of these people were in on the scheme. There were people in the medical research world that were involved in the scheme. In addition, there was a lot of mysterious money moving to a lot of different accounts and a lot of different people. And he also doesn't disclose here that he's funding a lot of really bizarre studies. Like one study we talked about a few months ago where he was helping to fund a project to build a robot toddler. Yes, that is real. And obviously all of the studies and research he funded that were looking into the potential for human cloning, which a lot of people obviously find to be very disturbing. He is being truthful in a way there, but he's not telling the whole truth. But he goes on. I am also an unmarried man and have openly devoted a significant part of my life to adventure. Adventure. That's what we call in this letter. That's what he refers to his international network. Adventure. I am a pleasure seeker, a hedonist. I chose not to lead a convention, monogamous, domestic life. I have also frequently paid for. So definitely those things are true in a way. He was a pleasure seeker. He was a hedonist being someone that just seeks pleasure at all times any way they can get it. He was not monogamous. He didn't have a domestic life. He did frequently pay for. What he chooses to ignore here, though, is that a lot of this happened due to human trafficking. He also doesn't include the fact that most of the people he paid and did these things with were minors and younger individuals. He also doesn't mention that he invited friends of his to these parties. He also doesn't mention that he set up lots of his friends who also lived hedonistic, pleasure-seeking lifestyles with to be. So I just find it crazy that he actually describes. Keep in mind, at this point, when he writes this letter, he's not only been accused of trafficking and human trafficking and all these horrific things and blackmail gathering, but he was also convicted in the past of soliciting minors for profit. So he makes no mention of that in the letter. He just talks about the prostitution part. And you and I could argue all day the ethics, the morals of prostitution as a career choice or as a legitimate form of work. I think I'm in the camp where if you legalize things and you regulate things, less people are going to be because, you know, it doesn't matter if you and I would never pay for or would never do this or that. There are people out there that are always going to. So it's just a reality of our world that a lot of people just choose to ignore. Making something illegal doesn't make people stop doing it. I mean, it's like drug use. Other countries have decriminalized lots of substances and turned their problem on its head. And instead of saying we're just going to arrest everybody and fill up our prisons, they've made things legal, they've regulated things, and deaths have significantly dropped. Incarceration rates have significantly dropped. Gun violence, or just violence in general, in a lot of these countries has significantly dropped. So that's where I stand on the issue. But I find it for Epstein to not mention that he's remorseful, that he targeted in this scheme. I mean, it's an immediate dishonesty. And here's going to be even more dishonest. In 2006, the police in Palm Beach, Florida, where I've lived, began a systematic surveillance of my house. For over 6 months, they observed, on sometimes a daily basis, many different women entering and leaving. These women, most of whom worked in local massage parlors and strip clubs, false, came to my house to give massages, often with a happy ending, sometimes more. They were paid approximately to come. And that's, he just doesn't write a number value there. He's waiting to figure it out. Most of these women, more than 100 in all, returned on one or more occasions. Many introduced their friends to me. No, this is not conventional behavior. Yes, this is a demi-monde that exists on the fringe of respectable society where men who have money and women who need money meet. Paying for sex, as often as it was available, became, on my part, a compulsive behavior. So there are some kernels of truth in there. Yeah, he had this compulsive behavior. Yes, he was paying, but he's once again not mentioning that a number of these women were and they were proven to be. Look at the sweetheart deal. Look at the indictment. Look at the charging papers. Look at the investigation. Not only did the police know that they were but there were more that they were prepared to bring in for trial that never got to see their day in court because of this stupid fucking sweetheart deal. Then he says, and he continues, the Palm Beach police interviewed some blank of the women who came to my house. Most were unwilling witnesses pressured by the police. Each described that they had accepted payment for services. I have no defense here. I paid for and broke the law. Then he says, the Palm Beach police further identified blank of these women who were under the legal age of consent. One was the others. I had no knowledge of anyone's actual age, and each of the women represented that they were 18 or older. I certainly do not have a sexual interest in girls. There is no instance or accusations of such behavior. Not true. Other than in the smallest number of cases, the women who came to my home were 18 to 28 years old. Indeed, if the police in their 6 months of surveillance saw a clearly underage girl enter the premises with what the police suspected was the intent to engage in a sexual act, the law would have compelled them to intervene. They did not. So we know that the law knew that this was happening and that the law did in fact know that these were minors. That's a whole part of the case, you know, part of the mystery is why didn't they act sooner? What else did they uncover that we never saw? Why was Epstein given a sweetheart deal and given a very fluffy prison sentence when if they would have brought in all of the witnesses and victims, he definitely would have been serving a significantly longer prison term? Those are all questions that officially, according to the U.S. government, are unanswered. We know the truth. It's because, according to many people, he was working with the U.S. government in some capacity, and so they couldn't have their informant flip into a rat. They couldn't have their blackmail gatherer turn witness and start spilling all the beans. They had to give him something light and fluffy to make it look like they punished him, even though they really weren't. And even then, now we know that Epstein was having people drive to jail, and he was getting out of jail and having sex with them in the back of a truck. We know that he was getting serviced at his office, which he was allowed to work in during his prison term. It's just crazy. But he continues. In 2000 TK, I was charged by the state of Florida with TK counts of solicitation. Name TK, title, and position TKE, believed that I should be charged with a more serious crime than existed under Florida law. He wrote a letter to U.S. Department of Justice asking it to interfere in the case, even though prosecution is everywhere a state offense. In order to claim jurisdiction, the Department of Justice needed to make a case that there was interstate travel involved in what I had done. I would have had to arrange to transport a woman from one state to another. Hilarious, he says that here. That had not occurred, and they could not make that case. We know that occurred. I mean, dude, you had a private jet you were flying women on. I mean, this was known back then. In 2019, when he wrote this letter, this was like publicly known. And there were tons of accusers that had publicly made these statements. Hence, the only fallback they had was to argue that I had spoken on the telephone from one state to a woman in another state. Given the weakness of its case, the Department of Justice offered a settlement, a plea bargain. That agreement is now being challenged as too lenient. But whereas a state charge would have resulted in a likely misdemeanor charge with no jail time, I spent 12 months in a Florida jail. Oh, poor Epstein. He had 12 months in Florida. He admitted in this letter having sex with multiple girls that were 17 years old. And he also admitted that one of the children was in the same letter. And yet he's bitching here and whining about how he had to spend 12 months in a Florida jail. He's so incorrect on so many things here. Yeah, I mean, if you're caught in a sting, you can have a light sentence if you're meeting someone who's of age and they catch you doing so. But we're talking about the systemic abuse of here. And it's just funny to see him completely ignore the actual reality of his situation. I also agreed to a financial settlement with blank and to pay their legal bills. One aspect of the settlement that has been widely commented upon and attacked is that it offered immunity to my co-conspirators. This has been interpreted by the media as, somehow, a way to protect unnamed powerful figures who I might have known. This is preposterous, to say the least. The co-conspirators referenced here were in fact the girls who brought their friends to my house. We know that that's also not true. The unnamed co-conspirators could have included some of the women who were recruiting other girls into the scheme, girls, but more than likely the co-conspirators were a network of individuals that worked with Epstein, like Ghislaine Maxwell, Jean-Luc Brunel, any of these other individuals. I mean, we can see in the Justice Department's charts and forms that they knew that Epstein had a web of co-conspirators. They knew it, and they weren't just victims of his. But Epstein continues. One result of the significant settlements that I have paid and of the legal fees that I committed to covering is almost non-stop litigation against me. Various of the current litigants have accepted, in some cases, 7-figure payouts and then continued further civil suits against me, including suing the government to break a deal under which they have been paid in order to seek even more compensation. 2 weeks ago, a federal judge agreed to do just that. In effect, what the judge has said is that if, at any time in the future, parties in a case are unhappy with its outcome, they can sue to have a legal settlement undone. In the years that this case has been litigated, a massive shift in social consciousness has occurred. Quite a short time ago, most state laws treated solicitation as a minor offense. Like many of us, I have come to understand that prostitution is more than a victimless crime. Highly ironic for Epstein to type out that sentence. But the efforts to now retry me in this new climate for a crime that I have already been punished for is neither just nor fair. I have spent a year in prison paying for my mistakes. I have paid compensation to the victims. I have not beat the system. I have been judged by it. That's not true. Once again, he's just lying. Normal guy, if a normal guy raped a 15-year-old, multiple 16-year-olds, and raped dozens of other women who all came forward and said they were pressured into performing these acts on this guy, they'd be in prison for life. At minimum, Epstein did beat the system. And that's because he worked for the system. At least I believe. And he finishes, I am 66 years old. In the years since my guilty plea to charges and agreement to register as a sex offender, I have lived a chastened and scrupulous life. No further accusations have been against me. Which is false. I mean, he had tons of accusations against him. He says he's 66 years old. This was written in 2019. You had lots and lots and lots of accusations that were public against him. Like the accusations of Virginia Giuffre, Sarah Ransom. I mean, I could go on and on and on. So, once again, he's just lying. And we know that he's lying because the continued practically up until his death. I have endeavored to live my life privately and quietly and continue to make contributions on scientific research and development efforts that I believed will have a significant impact on future well-being. A man is not one thing. I try to live a life that is right, to make amends for what I have done that is wrong, and to hopefully apply my resources and talents to have a positive effect on the world. That's the letter from Jeffrey Epstein. We don't know where that letter was meant to go. I believe that he was trying to write this in order to release a public statement in the event of him being arrested or some investigation beginning, but we don't know. I mean, that's what it sounds like. This sounds like a PR letter, and it's just funny to read Epstein's own words where he's trying to distance himself from what happened in Florida, yet at the same time, he had continued doing all of that stuff. Like I mentioned, he was doing all this bullshit while he was serving that jail term. I mean, it's not like he was actually in a prison cell for 12 months. He was in the cushiest place imaginable. He could basically leave whenever he wanted to. He just had to sleep there like some sort of Hotel California situation. He was allowed to have his own office. He was allowed to have visitors in his office. He was allowed to have sex with someone in the back of a truck that came to him while he was serving this sentence. I mean, it's just lie after lie. And even him saying, you know, there have been no accusations against me, that's a lie. So I don't even understand why he would write that when anybody at that point could have Googled his name and seen that there were, in fact, lots of new accusations against him that were growing almost by the day. And then on top of that, his defense that he's a hedonist who is basically like a single billionaire playboy who just loves to pay for sex. It's laughable. I mean, it is true in a way because he was all of those things, but he was also providing those victims to other perpetrators. He was these people all over the world. He was working closely with other internationally known and figures in the world. So he knew all of this, and yet he continued to lie, which is why you can never trust a single thing that Epstein ever said really in any of his documents, unless they were secret documents that he never thought anyone was going to see. But I thought this was really interesting. He was dead shortly after he wrote this letter, and to my knowledge, this was never released or published anywhere. It was basically an unfinished draft. Why don't you let me know your thoughts about this letter and what this tells us in the comment section? I'm really eager to hear what you guys have to say about the contents of this letter, about what Epstein could potentially have actually been trying to say here. I mean, there's so many files. There's so much within the Epstein story that we could talk about all day, every day, for years on end. But it's important to cover these small things because a letter like this gives you insight into Epstein's mind. He, with this letter, was not ready to admit guilt. He was not ready to actually turn the page. He was not going to get arrested and go down without a fight. He was proclaiming his innocence before anything ever really even happened to him. So that's the Epstein letter. Anyways, y'all, thank you so much for tuning in. Keep that tinfoil hat on. Stay suspicious. Question everything. And I'll see you guys next week.